Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to take my time this evening to mark an occasion, an anniversary of sorts. Some of us up on the dais will remember that a year ago this month, we had an impromptu public hearing about race in these chambers. The catalyst for it was an encounter between a white police officer and a black pedestrian in our community. And for the better part of a week and for 3+ very intense hours in these chambers, we talked about race. And we became the focus of race in the Twin Cities. During that hearing, I heard something that I didn't expect to hear, and that was people of color in our community, residents of our community, who came in and told us that they feel unwelcome and uncomfortable in our community. And I think all of us felt like that's wrong, and that we need to do something about that. And in the years since then, we as a city, and I personally have spent a lot of time trying to wrestle with this issue, and I've learned a bunch of things, but there's a couple of things in particular that I wanted to share that I've learned in that. And the first thing I've learned is that this is not just a police issue. It's a community issue. We all bear responsibility for making our community welcome to people of all races. And while our police and other public servants have an important role to play in that effort, we can't outsource these obligations to our police or any public servants. Ultimately, it is us, the residents of this community, that have the responsibility to take on this issue. Once we articulate the values that we hold and the priorities that we hold dear, our public servants, including our police, will enthusiastically support us in our efforts to live those values. So that's the first thing that I've learned. The second thing I've learned is we have to talk to each other about race. And it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Because I have found as a middle-aged white guy that I can't understand what a person of color is going through unless I talk to that person and try to understand what it feels like to be in their shoes. Perhaps more important is what happens when you have those conversations. When you start talking to each other about race, you start to develop relationships. And when you start to develop relationships, those are the antidotes to racism. Because once you get to know someone, and you only do that by spending time talking to them, you stop paying attention to what they look like and instead focus on who they are. And that's true, by the way, whether you're talking to a white police officer or a black resident. So I think we as a city have made some progress since last October. I'm proud that we created, as a city council, we created a process for looking into this issue, for trying to figure out the right answers to this issue. I can tell you that in the work I have done, which I'll share in a minute with some of our staff, people in other communities are very impressed that the direction for our work on race and equity has come from the City Council and not up from other places. We've recruited a tremendous group of residents who, many of whom are people of color or people who have people of color in their families. And they are working away on trying to identify issues and help steer us in the right direction. We've invested, as our residents have indicated in the latest community survey they want us to, significant resources in providing the support for that task force and those working groups to move forward. And we've also invested the time and energy of our staff members. I've had the privilege of serving on our GARE team, which is a group of 5 city staff members, including Sergeant Brian Hubbard, who I've gotten to know and have really enjoyed working with on this issue. And we have been meeting monthly as part of a group of cohorts from around the metropolitan area to work on race issues and how we can address those both at a staff level and at a community level. As Scott and Lisa Schaefer and even Brian can tell you, I sometimes feel like we're not making progress fast enough, but we are making progress by talking about issues that make many of us uncomfortable. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what next steps are. The next step in this community, in this process, we've got some people who are working on task force and working groups, and we've got people who are working on the GARE team. But it's time to try to take those community conversations more broadly than these folks. And we will be, I don't have the dates yet, but we are going to be setting up some community conversations where we're asking people to come and have conversations around race that the Citizens League, who is helping support our Race and Equity Task Force, will be leading. I'm also pleased to share that our partners at the Edina Public Schools, who representatives were here tonight, are doing some good work on this issue as well. They have upcoming gatherings to facilitate conversations among community members on November 1st and November 8th from 7 to 8:30 at Normandale Elementary School. So I encourage anybody in the community who's listening to us tonight to find time to attend one of these gatherings, and more importantly, to find the courage to talk about and listen about race in our community. So one last thing before I close, we all need to know that this is not easy. It makes me uncomfortable to talk about race, but I can only imagine what it's like for a person of color to live race. And it's important that I try to understand that. I always worry that I'm going to say the wrong thing. All of us, I think, worry that we're going to say the wrong thing. But I've learned that talking leads to relationships, and relationships provide a couple of things. They provide understanding, where you get to know each other a little bit better, but they also provide forgiveness. If I say something stupid the 100th time I've talked to you, you're more likely to forgive me than if I say something stupid the first time I talk to you. I want to close by expressing particular gratitude to some in my neighborhood who've been leading the way on this work. Katie Mahoney is the principal of Highlands Elementary School. This is the school that all three of my sons attended. And she has, along with former principal Peter Hodney, who I've talked to you all about in the past, and former teacher Michael Seaman, led the way with things like Dinner and Discussion, which is an organized effort to get members of the Highlands community together for potluck dinners to talk about issues like race and the perspective that people of different races might have. And the Melanin Project, which teaches elementary schools students that color only goes skin deep and that all of us have inner beauty and inner value. Katie has been leading the Highlands community in the face of recent criticism that I'm sure you all have heard about by people outside our community with an ideological agenda that, in my view, is trying to bully them into silence by characterizing what they're doing as indoctrination. And while I understand that some members of our community fear their perspective will not be welcome in these community conversations, I challenge those of you who feel that way to have the courage to engage in the discussion, to listen to others and ask them to listen to you. I promise you it will be uncomfortable and worth it. Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Mayor.